Hey, hello, welcome. So as I mentioned, this is how to solve any problem, part 2. Part 1 is available. The replay is available. If you're currently a member, you can find the replay for both part 1 and for part 2 under module 1 strategy. And also for those of you who are members, I just added a second worksheet around problem solving today. It's called Creating Intention. So you can find that in the worksheets as well. If you want to download that and follow along as we're going through the workshop. Spectacular. Okay, so last week you'll remember I did mention that problem solving was a 2-step process. So the first step was understanding the problem. The second step is around solutions and creating results. And that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time today, is creating the results. I promised a recap of the self-coaching model. This is the tool that we use for problem solving. Regardless of whether you're trying to identify the problem or create results, we use this same tool. And so for those of you who are new to it, I will invite you to just take a piece of paper and a pen and jot down the side on the left-hand column, CTFAR. This is an abbreviation and it stands for, C stands for circumstances. Circumstances are the very neutral facts of the situation. And so we try to make it as neutral as possible. So when we're describing the circumstance, we don't use things like adjectives or adverbs. We just stick to the facts. The next part is the T stands for thoughts. And often we can see a circumstance and that can trigger the same thought habitually. I can think of lots of examples, as I'm sure you can, in terms of when I come into the kitchen, as an example, I'm often triggered to get something to eat. I should get something to eat, basically, is my thought. So what happens over time is that when we have the same thought around the same circumstance over and over and over again, that's the definition of a habit. Basically a habitual thought pattern, and it can become so habitual that we're not even conscious of the thought anymore. Now that thought often inspires or evokes a feeling. F stands for feeling. And then that feeling then in turn creates actions or behaviors for us. So when I feel a certain way, I take a certain action typically. And then the R stands for results. When I take certain actions, I'm creating certain results for myself. So that's it in a nutshell. The 5 letters stand for circumstance, thought, feeling, action, and result. Now, last week, let's see if you can see this. Last week, we talked about identifying the problem. And the way that we did that is we plotted the model, the tool, we populated the tool for what was happening in terms of the problem. This helped us to get really clear, some clarity and some awareness around what was going on. And we also found last week that when we got really specific and concrete around describing the circumstance, what happened is that would often cause us to have a different thought. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about starting at the result line. So starting with the goal or the objective and then moving backwards, reverse engineering that to come up with the intention that will most likely drive the behaviors that we want. So that's where we're going to focus today. Okay, I will keep an eye on the chat box in case there's anything that you want to comment on or ask during the course of the presentation, please feel free. I love the interaction. So, okay. So I mentioned before last week, what we did was we got really specific around the circumstances, and those specific circumstances often trigger a habitual thought. So the example that we used last week is my circumstance. An example from my own life was I had 5 tasks that I wanted to accomplish in 2 days. And rather than feeling like there was too much to do, my thought around that very concrete and specific circumstance was, this is manageable. And then the thought, this is manageable, created new feelings and actions for me. So as I mentioned, getting really clear on the circumstances can change our thoughts, can trigger new thoughts for us. And then the new thoughts can lead to new feelings. So this is manageable, for me, created feelings of empowered. That feeling of empowered led me to create a plan, to get more strategic, and then to take action from that feeling, that energy of empowered. And then the result of me creating a plan and taking action was that I made some progress. The beautiful thing about results is that they tend to reinforce the original thought. So when I make progress, it reinforces the thought, this is manageable. So it becomes a self-perpetuating positive cycle. So we're going to use this to create results for ourselves that then tend to reinforce our thoughts, beliefs, and habits in a way that really serves us. That's what we're going to do today. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this is very simple. We're going to take the same model, the CTFAR, self-coaching model, and we're going to start at the bottom with the result. We're going to get really clear on what is the result that we intend to create for ourselves. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll work backwards from that. So I'm going to walk through an example, but while I'm doing that, I would love it if you could put in the chat box, what are some of the results that you want to create for yourself? So on purpose, with intention, what is the result that you want to create for yourself? Give that some thought, and I'd love to see it in the chat box. And while you're thinking about that, I'll walk through the unintentional model, the problem statement with regards to procrastination. I see this one all the time. I love the quote. It said something like, 99% of all the humans procrastinate and the other 1% are lying, which just suggests to me that we all procrastinate in some fashion. I know that I do in some areas of my life. So this is a model that I work on continuously. And what it typically looks like for me is that I will have a task that I've planned for myself. I've actually put it into my calendar. So I have a planned task, and that time arrives for me to start that task. And the thought is, I don't feel like it, or some variation of that. I just want to finish what I'm doing over here before I start this new task. That one comes up for me quite frequently. And then when I think that thought, I don't feel like it, I feel resistance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if I think a thought frequently enough, it becomes a habit. Those neurons are firing in a habitual way. The pathway is really worn. And so I'm not even really conscious of the thought, I don't feel like it, or I'll just finish this first. It just feels like in that moment that I just keep going. I'm not even conscious of the thought, but I am often conscious of the feeling. And so in this case, the feeling that comes up when I tell myself I don't feel like it is one of resistance. Now, when I feel resistance, I definitely am more inclined to procrastinate, avoid, just keep doing what I'm doing, definitely not start the planned task is the action or inaction. And then the result that comes from me not doing the planned task, from me procrastinating, is that the tasks accumulate. And just like the positive reinforcement from earlier, this provides some negative reinforcement for me, this result, because as things are accumulating, I definitely don't feel like doing them. And in fact, I feel like doing them even less. Okay, so that's the procrastination model that I see most frequently for myself and in my practice as a productivity coach. I just want to make a quick note here about willpower, because often people will tell me, well, I don't need to, or the way for me to create different results is for me to use willpower. That's what people will tell me. And that's what I used to do as well. But I'll just build an unintentional model for you around willpower, just to demonstrate how this may not be a reliable strategy over the longer term. So what that looks like is I have the planned task, same circumstance. And what willpower sounds like in my head, it sounds like I will do it even when I don't feel like it. Kind of like I'm going to force myself to do this. The feeling that comes up when I use willpower is still one of resistance. And it's almost like it's making the resistance bigger. And I'll invite you to think about a tug of war, or this came up for me earlier. I was thinking about when I was much younger and my parents would tell me to do something. And the moment they told me to do something, my resistance to that became greater instead of less. And so when I force myself to do something, the resistance increases. Now I force myself to do it. So as an action, I might do it under duress, but there's definitely a lot of conflict going on in my brain. I'm like pushing against myself, in a sense, is basically what's happening. And then the result of forcing myself to do something that I don't feel like doing is that the task might get done. It might partially get done. But either way, I'm dragging my feet the whole time. I'm involved in a lot of self chatter, a lot of conflict within my own brain, and it's very draining. And so, if we rely on willpower as a strategy throughout our day to get things done, what ends up happening is at the end of the day, we're pretty much exhausted because we feel like we're forcing ourselves to do things all day long. If this is something that shows up for you, you'll know because the result is that you're very, very tired. When we use motivation, confidence, courage, persistence, patience, if we use some of those emotions to inspire us to take action, what often happens is that as a result, we feel energized by our actions, not depleted. So you'll know that you're relying on willpower a little too much by how you feel at the end of the day. Let me know if you have any questions about any of that. I thought it was worth taking a little bit of a deeper dive into that because I see that one all the time. So rather than relying on willpower, how can we create a result to overcome procrastination? And that's what we'll do in this model. So this is where we're going to shift from articulating the problem, and now we're going to define the results that we want for ourselves. And I see that some of you have put in the chat box the result that you're intending to create, which is beautiful. So I'll invite you to follow along. So we're going to start with the result. If you're writing it down, which is beautiful, write down beside the result that you're wanting to achieve. So maintaining a tidy, clean workspace. Yep. Starting an exercise routine. Yep. Okay. Changing a habit. Okay. Losing weight. Okay. That's great. Okay. So we start with the result. Now, with regards to my own procrastination habit, the result that I want to create is progress. And I also want to create motivation for myself. I know from experience that progress does create motivation for me. So if I can help myself to get started on something, what usually ends up happening is that when I see the progress, when I get into it, when I get into flow, motivation usually follows that. So for me, what I want to create is some progress to demonstrate to myself that that I should keep going. Now, the way that I'm going to create that progress and that motivation for myself is I'm just going to take the first step. This is a strategy and action that serves me very well. I'm the type of person that won't take the first step because it might feel like really, really big, like a project or something like that. I don't even know where to start. So I'll tell myself that I can't take the first step. So just taking one step, that action can create progress and motivation for myself. So that's my intent, is to take the first step. How do I take that first step? If we know that feelings fuel action, what is the feeling that I will need in order to take that first step? And when I looked at the procrastination model, I noticed that the feeling was resistance. So the feeling that I want to create over here in order for me to take the first step is acceptance. And the way that I'm going to create acceptance, the feeling of acceptance for myself, is by modifying my thought. So the thought that I have is all I have to do is the first step. And I'll invite you to think about what it is for yourself that creates the feeling of acceptance. I have a bunch of thoughts, a bunch of options for you if you're having trouble in this space. But one that works really well for me is the one, like I said, all I have to do is the first step. Another one that really helps me get over the friction of starting is the 10-minute rule. So if you're in the membership, you're familiar with the 10-minute rule. All it is that I tell myself that I do the planned activity for 10 minutes, and then I give myself the choice to continue. Now, this is different than willpower because I'm still giving myself the choice after 10 minutes. Willpower is where we feel like we don't have a choice. We're being forced to do something. So that's important about the 10-minute rule. It's still creating that sense of choice, which creates the feeling of acceptance. Some other thoughts, I can break it down. That's another thought that leads me to thinking about acceptance. I can figure it out. That's another one of my favorite thoughts. I'm making progress. The irony there is that in order to create progress, I can create progress by thinking I am making progress, which is kind of a fun experiment as well. So feel free to put that in the chat box. What are some thoughts that create acceptance? And what I mean by acceptance is I mean that feeling of movement towards something rather than pushing against something. Okay, so we saw that by creating a different thought about the exact same circumstance, we can create different feelings, different actions, and different results for ourselves. So as you leave the workshop today, I'll invite you to experiment with this a little bit. It's very interesting to see how our thoughts can really shape our results, especially over time. And so if we become if we start to create a habitual thought around just getting started, then our habit becomes one of proactivation. I don't know if that's a word, but in my mind, that's the opposite of procrastination. So if I have a habit of procrastination and I want to create a habit of proactivation, it's then creating some thoughts on purpose with intention and practicing those thoughts so that they create the same neural pathway that that old thought had. And that's the interesting thing about creating new thoughts as well. I'll invite you to explore it with patience, because sometimes this has been my experience. If I find myself slipping back into those default thoughts that limit me, I can get frustrated, or I can forget even that this is something that I'm working on. So it is a practice. It's creating a new muscle, and it requires reps. It's a new thought muscle that requires consistency and reps. So just taking some time to practice that over and over again is really important. One other thought or idea that I'll share with you about thoughts is that unlike an affirmation or a mantra is something that you repeat to yourself over and over again. What makes a thought more sticky, so to speak, is the amount that you believe in the new thought. So if I'm thinking to myself, all I have to do is the first step, I believe that thought 100%, if not more. And so that for me becomes fairly easy to practice. If it's a thought that I don't necessarily believe, like let's just say I'm working on a body image thought as an example. And let's say I have this thought, I don't like my body. And I'm working on a different body image thought, which is I like my body, I love my body. Well, if I don't believe that necessarily, I'll explore what I'll call some ladder thoughts. Those thoughts are in between the old thought and the new thought if I don't have 100% belief in that new thought. That's what differentiates it from an affirmation. It's the level of belief. So when you're practicing new thoughts, just make sure that they're thoughts that you can buy into. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to bring them to your free strategy session. If you're not a member, you can find the link on my website, financialwellnesscoach.ca. If you're a member, bring it to one of your free coaching sessions. And I can help you to build some ladder thoughts, I call them. Okay, now some time for audience examples. And what I would love is if someone was interested in coming on and sharing the screen with me, we could do a little bit of a walkthrough together of creating an intentional model. And let's just see here. So there should be a raise hand icon. Okay, so one of the participants is interested in losing 25 pounds. That's the result that she's wanting to create. Now, it's so interesting because I am currently helping one of my clients with this as well. So it just it really demonstrates the power of these tools for solving any problem and creating strategies to attain any goal. So it's so interesting. Okay, so the result is losing 25 pounds. Now, I'll invite everyone to participate in this as well, because it'll be a really useful exercise to engage in. Just in the chat box, what are the actions that would be required to experience the result of losing 25 pounds? And this is just a brainstorm at this point, so there's no wrong answers. What are some of the actions that would result in losing 25 pounds? Brainstorming. Okay, yep. Exercise, cutting out sugar, portion control. Yep, totally. Meal planning, drinking water, daily walk. Beautiful. Okay, all of those things sound amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, so those are some of the actions that we would need to take. And as we're setting our goals, there's a specific process that we can go through in terms of making the goal really specific and timelined and all that kind of stuff. So if you're in the membership, please feel free to check out one of those goal setting workshops. For the purposes of today, what we'll do is we'll put in the action line, break down the goal into actionable steps. How about that? That sounds kind of fun. Okay. So the result is losing 25 pounds. The action, or one of the actions that we would take, are defining the goal, breaking it down into actionable steps. Okay. What's the feeling that we would need in order to help us to take action towards this goal? Again, this is a brainstorm, so whatever comes up for you personally is beautiful. Okay, motivation is one of them. Yep. Confidence. Yep. I'm thinking for myself, one of the ones would be, I tend to like this feeling of empowered, because I think I've mentioned it 3 times. But it's that feeling of like, I can do this, basically. I guess that's a feeling of confidence, or this is manageable. Feeling healthy. Oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. Isn't that interesting that in order to create the result, like in my previous model, feeling the result of motivation, I tend to create thoughts and feelings in advance to create that result. So feeling healthy in this example leads to the result of creating more health for myself. So that's a beautiful example. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling motivated, I'm feeling empowered, I'm feeling healthy. What are those thoughts that create those feelings for you? Feel free to put those into the chat box. What are some thoughts that have you feeling healthy, empowered, motivated as it pertains to this goal of losing 25 pounds? As you're typing that in, I can share a couple of them with you. I can do this. That's a thought that always creates feelings of empowerment or movement for myself. I can do this. There are lots of areas of my life where I have achieved goals before, and it's just a matter of applying the same skills to this goal. That's kind of a long thought, but I tap into that one quite frequently. I will increase my sense of self-worth. Oh my gosh, that's a good one. I like the idea of pursuing goals in order to deepen the relationship with myself. And so I think this is partly what one of the participants is talking about is, for me, it's not so much about losing the 25 pounds as it is about discovering who I am, what I'm capable of, what's coming up for me in the journey towards that goal. So brilliant. And exploring my own sense of self-worth and my self-concept is an amazing byproduct of pursuing any goal. The thought is, I will have less aches and pains. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So tapping into some of that desire. Beautiful. That's one of the feelings that we didn't talk about, but is so powerful in terms of creating movement towards our goals, is desire. Why do I want to do this? So rather than feeling like I have to, I'm supposed to, I'm forced to, why do I want to lose 25 pounds? Because it'll increase my mental health, my physical health. I'll feel healthier. I'll be stronger. I'll have less aches and pains. I'll be able to have more energy. I'll be able to sleep better. I'll be able to keep up with my kids. All of those types of thoughts. Right now, even me saying them creates desire, the feeling of desire. So brilliant. Love, 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 love it. Couldn't love it anymore. And so we've got the thoughts, we've got the feelings, we've got the actions, and we've got the results. Now, we'll want to get really specific and concrete around the circumstances. And so the more general we have the circumstance, the more general our thoughts are going to be, and the less likely we'll take specific action. Okay. So in this particular example, the losing 25 pounds model, we'll want to get really specific and concrete around the action, or sorry, around the circumstance. And so the circumstance right now are the facts of the situation as it is today. So my current weight is X, whatever that is. So you'll write that down. My current circumstances in terms of meal planning is X. There might be some circumstances around the family dynamic. Now, this is going to be a bit tricky because your thoughts are going to want to sneak into the circumstance line here. So for me, what it sounds like is my daughter won't eat healthy food. That is a thought. That is not a circumstance. So as you're playing with all of these thoughts and circumstances, I'll invite you to get really, really clear for yourself on what's a circumstance and what's a thought. And the reason why is because we have a lot more control over our thoughts than we think we do. We tend to think we're at the effect of our thoughts and our habits. And yet when we become more aware of them and when we take ownership of them, we can change our thoughts without changing the circumstance, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So my daughter can refuse to eat what I cook. That's maybe the circumstance. And yet I can still create the result that I want in the same circumstance just by modifying my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, and creating my own results. So that's completely under my own control. That's one of the reasons why I love the self-coaching model so much, is because it really taps into those things that I can control. So often we'll look at a problem and we'll think to ourselves, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And then we feel at the effect of the circumstances. We feel at the effect of what's going on, the effect of my family, the pandemic, my work. And then that over time leads us to feeling powerless and out of control. And so that's what, if you're feeling that way, I have a lot of empathy for that. And the way to interrupt that is by starting to look at what is the difference between the thought and what is the circumstance. Getting really neutral about the circumstance can help us to manage the thoughts about the circumstance. I feel really passionate about that. So if you have any questions, again, please bring them to your free strategy session or your coaching sessions. I have a question in the chat box. Is stating my meal planning does not have enough healthy options a circumstance or a thought? Okay, this is one of the ways where you can understand if it's a circumstance or a thought. Now, technically, my meal planning does not have enough healthy options could be factual. However, there is some subjectivity that's sneaking in there with healthy. So that's why I would offer that it's a thought. And the way that you'll know is how it makes you feel. If you're thinking my meal planning does not have enough healthy options, and the feeling that comes up is one of like embarrassment or frustration or anxiety or anything like that, that tends to limit your actions, then I'll invite you to explore different thoughts, even though technically that could be factual. So what you could do is you could say something like, my meal plan, and this is in the circumstance line, my meal plan includes 1 vegetable, 2 vegetables, 3 vegetables, whatever. I'm just using an example. I'm not saying that this is what you need to do, but my meal plan includes vegetables, healthy fats, protein, and salad. I don't know. It's not so much what's included in the meal plan, it's how you think and feel about that meal plan that is the most important thing. So I'm working with a client right now, and she had a goal of losing a certain amount of weight by a certain amount of time. And the feeling that came up for her when she thought about that plan was, even when she broke it down, is that it was not possible. It was unmanageable. It was too ambitious. So she wasn't even bought into it in the first place. So the beautiful part about getting really neutral about what's in your meal plan, and I call that a daily protocol, what you're going to eat every day, getting really specific and concrete about that can take the emotional charge out of it. And so when you're thinking to yourself, this is what I'm going to eat, X, Y, and Z, and then your thought is, all I need to do is eat it, then there's less likelihood that you'll be challenged with some emotional drama around that. Does that make sense? And hopefully answered your question. Yeah, okay, great. If, any further questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Okay, I see that we're getting close to time. That was a beautiful example. So thank you so much for sharing that example with us. I'm just going to go through 2 quick examples, and then I'll wrap it up. So another example that comes up quite frequently is, I don't know how to do this project, or I don't know what to do. And so the thought is, I don't know what to do. The feeling is anxious. The action is resist. And the result is I get stuck. When I tell myself I don't know what to do, I get stuck. So if I wanted to create a different result for myself, one of progress as an example, maybe my action is small steps. Maybe the feeling I need to take those small steps is encouraged. And maybe the thought is something like, I can figure this out. I used to work in strategy and agility. And so this thought really serves me well. This idea that I can take a step and then I can tweak it and pivot, navigate as I go instead of trying to figure it all out from the beginning. That line of thinking serves me really well. And if you like that one, I'll invite you to give that one a try. So, okay, now this next example is I look at my workload and I think there's too much to do. That creates feelings of powerlessness because it makes me feel very out of control. There's too much to do. I can't even wrap my arms around it. The action there is freeze or frantic. We talked about this at the last workshop. And my result is that I get very reactive. I am less inclined to make a plan and get strategic. And then that feeds my original thought there's too much to do. So if I wanted to create a different result for myself, maybe something around a manageable workload, whatever that looks like, I would want to take some strategic action in order to create a manageable workload. Strategic meaning making decisions about what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. So taking some ownership over all of that. The feeling that drives me to create strategic action is the feeling of powerful, like I am in control. And in fact, that's my thought. I am in control of my workload. I get to decide what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, and how I'm going to do it. Creates feelings of powerful for me, which then creates strategic action, which then makes a much more manageable workload, which then feeds my original thought, which is I am in control of my workload. Okay, so amazing. Thank you everyone for coming. If you would like to attend a free strategy session, the link is on my website. What we'll do in that strategy session is we will figure out where you're currently at. We'll figure out what the results are that you want to create. And then together, we'll figure out the roadmap for how you're going to get from here to there. Just working through that exercise and having some awareness around where you're currently at and articulating your desire and the results that you're working towards, that in and of itself can be a very powerful exercise. It's often enough to move people from being stuck into being taking action into movement. And those results, that's the other beautiful thing, is that the tools that I've shared with you today and that we include in the membership site, they can apply to creating any result. So creating a new habit, losing weight, we saw that example today. Stop wasting time. So I know some of my clients, they spend more time than they want to on things like social media, Netflix, all of those kinds of things. So when it's against your will and you want to stop wasting time, bring that to your free strategy session. If it's intentional and you do it to unwind, then that's a totally different thing. It all depends on your thoughts and your feelings in that moment. Stop procrastinating, declutter and get organized, get a promotion, stop stressing and creating more peace. All right. That's brought us to the end. I'll pause for a moment and see if there's any questions.